We continue our discussion, and we have gotten to the second part where we are asking the parliament members and also experts to participate in the discussion. And in order to moderate this discussion, we have invited Sergey from Lithuania, who is Executive Director of Transparency International Lithuania.
Great. So I'm back. I suppose I can be very quick in reintroducing myself. I'm from Transparency International Lithuania. And as you know, Lithuania is the only country, to my knowledge, that has this unique arrangement when it comes to the law on lobbying. And that is we require cross-declaration of lobbying activities by both politicians and lobbyists of any kind of interaction that deals with proposals to change normative laws. I hope that makes me for an eligible host, but of course we have an absolutely esteemed panel here with us, a group of people who I'm sure will contribute to the discussion on lobbying and lobbying regulation in Latvia, because I understand that the purpose of our next hour or 55 minutes or so is to come out not only with a better understanding of what remaining issues there are to be solved and modus operandi that you would need to proceed these questions in mind, but also the steps that you plan to take in the forthcoming months to have a good regulation on lobbying. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you the panel speakers that we have here today. We have Inese Voika, member of the Latvian Parliament, the chair of the Parliamentary Working Group on Lobbying Transparency Regulation. We have Ainars Latkovskis, a member of the Latvian Parliament and representative of the New Unity Party. Rihards Kols, who is also a member of the Latvian Parliament and a member of the National Alliance All for Latvia for Fatherland and Freedom, LNLK. We have Laura Sanz-Levia, the Senior Legal Advisor, Council of Europe, GRECO, and Inese Kušķe, Consultant Public Administration Policy Department, State Chancellery of the Republic of Latvia. So the way we will proceed is we will take turns, and of course, each of you will have the first opening remarks, which I would very much like to ask you to limit to 3-5 minutes, if possible, so that we can have a lively Q&A session. As you know, our viewers can ask questions via the chat box here, Zoom, and also the Delna Facebook platform, and that will make it for a lively discussion, I'm sure. And without any further ado, Inese Voika, I would very much like to ask you to perhaps report a little bit on what your working group's been doing and what main outputs we should be aware of.
Thank you, Sergejus. Very kind of Transparency International to show us the international scope of its work. Maybe it is the first time in the history of the Parliament of Latvia that a panel of the parliamentarians is chaired by a neighbor, closer to our Baltic cooperation, which I, as a member of the Baltic Assembly, truly cherish. But now let's talk about what we have been able to achieve in the Parliament with our partners from outside the Parliament in drafting the legislation. I think most of the points have been already mentioned in one way or another through the introductions early on from Dalna and from my colleague on the working group, also the chair of the Defense and the Interior and Anti-Corruption Committee, Juris Rancāns, and also through the good practice presented by our Anti-Corruption Bureau and other experts on the panel. But I will say it in my own words, as Sergejus, as you said, as to to report on where we are in our thinking and where we are in our work. And I will do it in few brief points so that we can discuss some of the issues later. For that, I have created a little PowerPoint, which I am happy to share with you. Is especially proud of my timeline. in terms of presenting it to you. It was what Juris said. We are working in the framework of what Juris mentioned before, that we have prepared the work since the beginning of this session of the Parliament, which started in November 2018, and that led to the beginning of the working group in November of 2019. The work stopped during the first pandemic wave, and we are moving towards adopting the law this year or latest next year when our work of this Parliament ends. So there should be some room to see if there are some things we still need to work on. And then we want to give this law an ample time for it to enter into force, so that there is time to additionally talk to the constituencies. We are doing a lot of consultations, a lot of talk, but the experience of Latvia shows that people only wake up when the law is actually there in place. So we want also to see the gradual implementation, and what exactly it will be, we will see. We are very much looking at the good examples around the world and learning from Ireland, where they did have the law enter into force, but they didn't punish anyone for not registering or not submitting the declarations in the first phase of the law. So that type of changes we will be discussing with the working group. And here, on the first slide, the red arrow is for the month of February this year, when we had a public consultation of draft principles of the lobbying legislation. There are two important things that we did do the public consultation of the draft principles, which might be the first public consultation in such scope in terms of time given to the public, and that stems from the reason that we are writing this law in the Parliament. That was one of the roadblocks last time, that the government and Anti-Corruption Bureau came to the Parliament and were not received quite well. So this time the Parliament does the work, but the actual consultation process that usually takes place in the government, that was described by previous speakers, where we do have good procedures, that has not yet happened. So we have made it happen this February, and we will make sure that we do continue to consult on the draft law before it gets into the formal procedure of the readings into the Parliament. The working group is an informal way of doing the work in the Parliament, and we have more freedom than it will be in the legislative process, which we hope to enter in the fall this year. So this about the timeline. This is our working group, 10 members of members of the Parliament of all 7 factions, and one member of independent who's left one of the factions but had joined the working group earlier, continues to work with us, and NGOs and experts from NGOs and some governmental institutions like the Ministry of Justice, State Chancellery, and Ombudsman and Anti-Corruption Bureau sitting on our working group. We do have made sure we are consulting and have invited them to the working group, the business partners, the 3 biggest business organizations in Latvia, the Workers' Confederation, the Chamber of Commerce, and Foreign Investors Council of Latvia. We have had at least 2 bigger talks and few more informal consultations with NGOs united in the Latvian NGO Alliance. The Chambers of Commerce have been active. The PR Association as one of the places where the so-called professional lobbyists are also working. Just to name the few, this is not an exclusive list, but to give you an overview of our process. Few words about our legislative approach. The speaker from the US, thank you. You did say exactly how we are viewing at this, and I will repeat this: that lobbying is advocacy, and we need more of this. It should not be a taboo or viewed as a corruptive act. We want to positively approach defining new relationships between those who protect and defend their interests vis-a-vis the government, and make it so we can establish these relationships. And this is primarily the law, so we understand how, and this can happen better. So the government officials are not hiding from consultations because they might be accused of talking to the business associations, and so that also those who don't have the best connections yet in the NGO world would know and better learn their ways into protecting their interests and carrying out advocacies. We are taking the advice from OEC and other international experts of the broad definitions to avoid, on my slide, we do have missing words. We want to avoid the pitfalls where, the definition of the lobbying would be too narrow, the definition of who is defined as lobbyist or advocate could be too narrow. And then we, at the same time, want to have the broad definition, but also be clear so that we don't get into the Orwellian world of asking everyone to declare every thought, interest, and every single interaction. The definition of where to draw the line is ongoing, and discussion here might also contribute to this. Instead of focusing only on lobbyists as who is doing it, we want to focus on lobbying as an activity. So it can happen anywhere, but it has to be transparent and it has to be seen. One of the first clauses of the goal of the law that we have already drafted in our working group, we talk about transparency and equal access, keeping in mind also the integrity of the process. And we are looking into shared burden of reporting responsibilities between the government and the private entities that are doing the lobbying. That might be a difference between other countries that are currently drafting the law, like Finland, or already have the law, like Ireland, where they focused only solely on the private sector. And we are looking at drafting one law, but we also are working to include other laws in the picture, like the procedure law, law on the procedure of the parliament, law on municipalities, where some of the procedures and transparency clauses might be introduced directly to the particular laws. As mentioned by the few speakers before, anti-corruption legislation in Latvia has a comprehensive coverage. Only the law on lobbying is missing, but we need to work on missing elements in this field. For example, the code of ethics for the parliamentarians and other officials, and looking at including the actual lobbying activities and how they should be defined. We are looking to focus on transparency measures on the legislative footprint and transparency of the meeting agendas. And legislative footprint of the consultations held throughout the creation of a piece of the decision, mostly legislation, is something that we want to focus. We also want to focus on transparency of ownership, membership, and finances of those who are lobbying their interests, so that when the decision makers now meet someone, they know whom they are talking to. Because I agree with the speaker from the US that all interests of legitimate businesses, legitimate other organizations are legitimate. The question is how they are deliberated and taken into account and the benefit of the general public good. We will be discussing, how and what needs to be declared and how often the reports on lobbying from the private entities should be given. We are not yet in the discussion, but we are getting support that this is needed, but that we should avoid bureaucratic pitfalls and we should not increase the bureaucratic burden. Of course, that will take some time and maybe, moving back and forward. So our main goal is not to lose the scope and the aim of the goal of making lobbying more transparent in Latvia. And what we are backed with in our work is what the people of Latvia think. Here we have the results of a public survey carried out at the end of December last year, where we got the support where 61% of population from the survey say that engagement of members of society would improve quality of decision making. The cynical view for this number is that the parliament and other decision makers have quite low trust in the eyes of the public. So the cynical view is, of course, we will do better than you, so just let us do it. However, 74% in that survey also said that they do support the lobbying regulation, and that might bring that this could be a good thing. So this is in a nutshell what we are doing, how our thinking goes, and what we want to achieve. Thank you.
Dear Inese, thank you so much for this very comprehensive overview of what the working group is dealing with. And I think it's a great introduction to the ensuing discussion. So let me thank you for the time being, and right away ask Ainars. Ainars, what do you make of the progress by the working group? And because transparency often is equated to trust. The greater the transparency in the public of the public institution, the greater the trust in that institution, one would say. I'm curious, how would you see the law on lobbying as a tool to increase the public trust in the parliament and other legislative institutions?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this conference, and you'll have to excuse my English because it has been a while since I have been talking in this language. For a year, we're not let out of our homes and working places, so no more international conferences, no more speaking in English. But I understood that I was asked to participate in this conference because I'm very old and have an institutional memory. And when I looked at presentation by my very good colleague Inese, I saw her timeline starting year 2019, November. My timeline concerning lobbying laws starts 2002, a second week of November. I was elected as a new member of parliament, and I was elected to chair newly formed anti-corruption committee. In our first meeting, I brought to the meeting whiteboard and some markers. And with 12 members of this committee, we were kind of dreaming about goals which have to be achieved by this committee, what is the mandate of this committee. And actually, two of the things went on the top of the list, what we have to do in this committee. One was ethics code for members of parliament. And another thing was lobbying regulation. Ethics code was implemented. Lobbying regulation, we are still struggling. What is interesting at that time was the funds available for committee. We commissioned research report to one of political scientists, Valds Kalniņš, and he made the report and made a presentation to committee. And I vividly remember that discussing with members of this committee, we all agreed that we should take first steps and probably start with easy regulation where we would ask lobbyists to self-declare themselves, kind of make a registration. And as it very often happens in Latvia, it used to happen every second year, new government, it happened that I went to work as a minister. And those who took over the job of this committee decided not to pursue this piece of legislation. So later that job was overtaken by anti-corruption agency, and the representative of anti-corruption agency already talked about that. That was year 2008, but it you know, worked in vain and didn't result with some piece of legislation. I think this working group, which was created under the auspices of Defense and Interior Committee, is moving ahead, and they have common agreement what they want to see in this draft bill, and this is very good because I mean, like, you know, what also prosecutor from United States told, things change. Even though we don't have specific lobbying legislation, things have changed for good also in this field where interests of lobbyists are represented in parliament or interests of different NGOs, enterprises. But 10, 15 years ago, sometimes it was in a very pure form. And I remember when I took over in 2010, chairing Defense and Interior Committee, and this committee is responsible for money laundering legislation, and these kind of laws were very heatedly debated in parliament, and there were many interests. And if you know recent modern history of Latvia, you know what kind of problem it has been for Latvia. And we had cases where a member of committee puts down proposal for the second reading, and when I, as a chair, would ask a member to explain his or her proposal to colleagues. Member who sits, members are sitting around the round table, turns around, looks over the shoulder where representatives of certain bank are sitting, and just asks, "Could you explain?" You know, it's so pure. It's very pure form of lobbying the wrong way. We have this case where one of the former prime ministers, who later became a member of parliament, submitted proposal which used Latin words, mutatis mutandis. And when I asked him to explain his proposal, he didn't know what these words mean. It was so funny. He was so frustrated, but he, you know, there were no guys around in the room from the bank who could explain what they have written for him. And say, but one of the cure for this was what we introduced in our committee, and I know it's used by other committees, and it's still used now by my good colleague Sanz. You know, by the rules of procedure, and it's in many parliaments around the world, members of parliaments are eligible to submit proposals, amendments to laws. We have institutions as parliamentary secretaries, mediators between executive branch and parliament. They can submit proposals. Ministers could do that. Prime Minister can do that. But what we do when these interest groups write letters and propose something, we actually put them on this draft bill in the tables. So you see them, and very often it happened that what you see is a member of parliament submits the same exact proposal as is submitted or written in the letter to the committee by a certain commerce organization. So it's easy to expose, you just expose them. And then you see, and then a member of parliament, MP, they actually, left without words in these committee meetings. Of course, later in the plenary session, these proposals doesn't appear because by rules of procedure, they could be discussed in the committee, but not in the parliament. So, putting some things open, you can also achieve results even if you don't have a specific regulation. You just have to use your brain. But year by year, things have improved, I have to say. And if we agree on what Inese and other colleagues are doing and produce one draft bill for this, I think it would be a good thing for Latvian Parliament. At least formally, we would be done with this, but also I look forward that they, like it was told by many people talking today, lobbying is not such a bad thing. In the last fraction meeting, we had a teleconference with a union of teachers. They were lobbying for higher salaries. So nothing wrong with that, openly discussing with us what they want, and we were asking questions. So let's just conclude with happy perspective that I think this parliament will be the one who finally will end what was started in 2002. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Ainars, for this very elaborate story. Stories from the legislative frontier are always interesting and make you pause and think, because indeed, I think there's nothing wrong with lobbying. And the sooner we agree on that, the sooner it will be easier for everybody to speak about it in constructive terms. And that's why I'm so happy that we also have Rihards with us. I'm curious, Rihards, what you make of the working group's results and the idea that it's not just about meetings, it's about the legislative footprint, and it's about being able to see who stands behind particular draft laws amendments. Is it possible to achieve in Latvia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me and, to give, to provide opportunity for me to shed some light. I mean, I have to confess that in my capacity in the parliament, I do have, engagement when it comes to lobbying, but lobbying by different size and different, spectrum. It's more which country is lobbying what because of the Foreign Affairs Committee. So therefore, for me, it's easy to distinguish, one topic or another that is being lobbied by country, by country groups. But that's, just a small remark. I mean, a lot has been said in the first panel. The challenges and issues, particularly by the Anti-Corruption Bureau itself. Nobody doubts that we do need to have a lobbying regulation. I think there is a consensus within the parliament. The question remains in what way, in what kind of format it will be introduced. Ainars mentioned a lot of already anecdotes when it comes to the understanding by the decision makers, legislators, when it comes to lobbying. I mean, one other anecdote I can say that another MP I will not name, when he was asked, uh, where did you, who drafted this and that, proposal that you submitted? He said, I don't remember. I just, whatever amendments I receive from my voters, I don't even read them. I just submit them, and and go go deal with that. And again, I mean, he sees himself as servant of the people, his constituents. If they write to him, this needs to be done. Why to scrutinize? I will just submit, and then the parliament will decide: is it a good proposal or a bad proposal? And this is something, I think the problem is not about in general about the regulation. I think that the problem is also in the mindset, not only in decision makers area, but also when it comes to policy drafters. I'm talking about the state officials, but also in the general public. There's a mixed understanding when it comes to what is the term lobbying. And I'm convinced in the majority, not majority, but a large amount of people in Latvia sees word lobbying as something criminal, which is totally opposite in Western countries or across the ocean in the States. And that is something I think will be a problem, even though will have the law in place. There will be always suspicion. The lobbying is not a good thing, and this is something, when it comes to legislation, we see that the struggle. Another thing that we're still improving, and there's still not a clear understanding by even by the members of the parliament when it comes to conflict of interest. It happens all the time. And and this is something, when if we will introduce the legislation which is over regulated, I think we will have a lot of issues. So my assessment is surely yes, we do need legislation. My concern is, and something I hope enough attention is paid to, is not to overdo it. I mean, we should not fall into the trap over regulation, which could really result in having the opposite effect. And instead of transparent lobbying practices, we would have actually underground lobbying. Uh, that is something, we will continue to see in cafeterias, in the restaurants, sitting, oh, we're just dining here, but actually, as gentlemen from the States describe these scenes about backstage rooms with the cigars and etc. and things happening. Really, the focus should remain on transparency and clear, non-complicated regulation that would leave no room for debates about interpretations of what or who exactly has to register where and etc. So this is where the focus should be, rather than aesthetics. I mean, which can be important, yes, but not vital in terms of this legislation. And moving towards really like detailed and complex legislation really will lead us to the same place where we have been for the last 15 years. Instead, lobbying law should establish the principles, first of all, principles, and to whom they are applicable. Everybody speaks about the rules of procedures. We actually need to speak about rules of engagement. I mean, we have different procedures already. Ainars very much outlined it, that if you use your head, it's there, and it's happening. But the question is about the rules of engagement, and that is something that we lack. And this would aid in eventual change in the public perception of lobbies, a paradigm shift in a society where defending and representing interests would not be viewed with such a inherent suspicion or even claims about illegal activities. So overall, of course, the working group is on the right track. My invitation for them would be not to over-regulate it. Of course, you can always, first of all, let's have the legislation in place. We can always improve it, looking at how is actually the understanding, not only from decision makers, but from the general society, from the business environment as well. And I think it's more about the mindset, and also the connotation of the word lobbying. Maybe for in case for Latvia, because we love to fight about wording. is this, exact wording or not? And maybe in Latvia, it not necessarily has to be lobbying law. It might be, something other, because I have to say, lobbying word has been contaminated already in some ways in society altogether. It's not a pure word in its, kind of basic meaning. Thank you.
Rihards, thank you so much for your thoughts. It got me thinking that that's exactly the way we approach that. We at TI Lithuania approach the law and lobbying here in Vilnius. Of course, it does not need to be platonic. It needs to be workable. The question is, how do you know when the law and lobbying works? We've had the law for 20 years, and I don't think it really worked. This time around, with all the new amendments, it seems to be kicking. And I think two main takeaways from our first 6 months or so is that it's essential to have a strong monitoring authority that takes full responsibility to make the law its own. So we have the Chief Officials Ethics Commission that is now educating the politicians, decision makers, engages with lobbyists, and we see a spike in registered lobbyists, in NGOs, public advocacy organizations registered, meetings declared. But the other thing is that it has to be data-driven. So data that is provided by the parliament, by business associations, other organizations, has to be there in an open data format. It has to be comparable, because otherwise it's very difficult to know. So these are very good questions, and I'm so happy that you're asking them already now. And that's why I'm also so happy that we have Laura with us, because I understand that she can help us answer at least some of these questions. Laura, if you could join us with the video, if you've done so already, that's absolutely great. What would be key ingredients for a good law and lobbying to you? Please share your thoughts with us.
First of all, good afternoon from sunny Strasbourg. Somehow exceptional in April, but we have a nice day today. It is a pleasure to be here today with you, to see some old friends also in this panel with whom I have been cooperating in the past, both in the framework of GRECO as delegates, Inese Kušķe and Inese Voika, very much as well when we came to evaluate Latvia in the fourth evaluation round. Thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here and to touch base again with Latvia. I was the responsible officer of the fourth evaluation round visit to Latvia back in June 2012. That's 9 years ago. And I have also followed the much of the compliance procedure, which lasted 5 years. And as Inese mentioned, when we came here when we went to Riga, there were already some quite strong features of the system of integrity in Parliament. First of all, there was outside Parliament, there was the role of the GNAP, which has been an institution that has always been a model in Europe that has been very much supported by GRECO, where we issued a number of recommendations to strengthen its role, especially to enhance its independence, and law on conflicts of interest that was quite strong, with a very important feature, which was the financial disclosure regime, a very comprehensive system, well monitored by both the GNAP and the State Revenues Agency. We recognize that. As I think it was Ainars mentioned, there was a code of conduct already in place from 2006. And we thought also in the line that the GNAP was taken, that code of conduct, something that many other countries did not have and have not had in the course of the fourth evaluation round. There has been a number of recommendations for countries to actually adopt a code of conduct. But we thought that the code of conduct of Latvia needed to be revamped, needed to be made a more living document. And we issued 5 recommendations for members of parliament. 2 of them were complied with. As you know, one of them dealt with the abolishment of administrative immunities, a system that was in place since 1922. And that required a constitutional amendment. That was a very important step in Latvia. And then there were other 3 that were more about enhancing the integrity and enhancing the expertise about integrity matters in Parliament. And as I said, that was something that the GNAP already had in mind, because the GNAP at the time we arrived there was trying to make sure that not only the rules of the laws on conflict of interest were understood, but also the rationale behind them were understood by the different subjects that were covered by the law. That meant embedding in the culture, embedding in the working practice of the different groups, including parliaments, this issue of preventing conflicts of interest. And so we recommended that the code of conduct was updated, especially that it was coupled with guidance, and that there was an ongoing discussion on ethical matters on an individual basis through confidential counseling, but also on an institutionalized level, through frequently asked questions, through training. And we also thought it was important that the code of conduct was put into working practice, and that an internal mechanism should be in place to effectively apply the code and make sure that there was compliance with the code. The issue of lobbying was another recommendation. So these things of revamping the code, updating the code, guidance and counseling, and enforcement and compliance with the code, plus the issue of lobbying, are three recommendations that remained outstanding. We closed the compliance procedure, that's the follow-up to the evaluation procedure, in December 2020, and these recommendations remain pending. We assess them as not implemented, because there were many changes underway that dragged along the years. I mean, when we went there, I understand that the law on lobbying was since 2002. In 2012, we went there, and exactly, they told us that there was a draft over there. So I'm very happy that we have this discussion today, because it means that even though the procedure in respect of Latvia, the GRECO procedure in respect of Latvia was closed, this has not been put aside. This is not in a cupboard, and the thing is ongoing. When it comes to lobbying, I have to say, and I have to agree with what has been said, it must be seen as a legitimate and also a beneficial activity, and it's part of a democratic, of a functioning democracy, because for two reasons. One is because it will help decision makers to make informed and sound policies, because these people are experts on those matters, and also because these groups are the persons who are going to be primarily affected by the decisions that are going to be taken. So it is important that they are heard. What is important also is that lobbying takes place in an ethical and transparent manner. Now, there are two sides of that equation. There's on one side the lobbyists, and on the other side the subjects being lobbied. Given that GRECO was looking into a specific group, members of parliament, our recommendation was strictly geared to that group, meaning that what we asked for was for rules on the standards that had to be expected by members of parliament in their relationships with lobbyists and third parties that are trying to influence policy making, decision making processes. This is a recommendation that has received, I would say, 50%, and I actually counted them this morning, of our members, and it's a recommendation where members are struggling. No, it's not only Latvia, it's other members that are struggling. As the prosecutor from the United States was saying, this is an evolving and challenging matter. I'm aware that a number of countries are either starting to regulate it or amending the regulations. That's, for instance, the case of the UK as we speak now, or Slovenia. But the recommendation of GRECO was, I think, narrower in scope, and I wanted to explain why it was narrower in scope than what you are doing now, which is a broader regulation on lobbying. I think I stop here, and then afterwards I could continue on what we think that could be done to provide this guidance, which is useful for both the members of parliament to understand what they should be doing when approached by lobbyists, which are the rules or the guiding principles that should guide their action, but also for the public, so that they understand that there are ethical obligations for both sides of the spectrum. And I think that if you are regulating lobbying in a holistic manner, these issues of standards of conduct for lobbyists and those being lobbied must be part of the law. Thank you, and I pass the floor to our colleagues.
Yes, thank you so much. By the way, colleagues, I apologize if my sound sometimes is a little bit off. That's the reality of internet life. But I hope you can hear me well enough, and we'll see now that I will ask Inese Kušķe to join in. And Inese, perhaps you can help us decipher this puzzle. In your mind, who should declare lobbying activities? Parliamentarians, politicians, business people, registered lobbyists? And should NGOs, public advocacy organizations, be a part of that regulation? What's your take?
Yes, hello, everybody. Well, from the point of view of the executive branch of power, I think, first of all, I wanted to outline that we have quite comprehensive procedures in place already for the decision making in general, and in particular for public participation. And I think overall these procedures are respected, especially by the responsible civil servants. We publish at different stages the decisions and the opinions received. We organize public consultations, etc. And of course, our meetings at the Cabinet of Ministers are open, and agenda and participants can be seen by everybody. So we should, of course, take into account these existing materials and see how to reduce the administrative burden by linking the already published opinions or other information that will be required to be published in this register with what already is done. Also, another novelty that is coming into place, hopefully in June, July, is the new portal for development of legal acts and policies in the executive branch. All those documents that shall be adopted by the Cabinet of Ministers will no longer circulate in emails or letters, but will all be in one place in this portal, and everybody will be able to see the progress in developing legal acts, take part, submit opinions, both members of society and of course other colleagues in the public authorities. So that's another change in the area of openness of decision making and integrity. I don't think that with this in mind, I wanted to say that there's no need for lobbying law. I think there are also other activities taking place that are probably not part of these regular decision-making procedures or consultations that we organize. There can be also meetings taking place in the initiative of a member of society, a business organization, or groups of population like teachers that were mentioned, or anybody else. And most of them are legitimate, and it's actually very good to be active and express your opinion and call a minister, state official, etc., or member of parliament and express your opinion. So, but these life situations can be very different. So I think it's good that we'll have another new instrument to registering something that we would usually probably not register. I also think that it will be probably important for political officials, because most of the procedures that are in place are mostly for civil servants in charge of a legal act, etc. But the political official, I think, is more, it has different lifestyle. meetings, and people are more tempted to call and arrange something in a good way also, less than they would call me, for example, and ask to solve some problems, especially for the members of parliament, where, as colleague from CNAB pointed, comparatively there are less requirements to register such meetings at this stage, or to explain who is the author of some proposal. So I think it would be a good instrument for political officials as well. And the final point that I wanted to make is about implementation. I think that will be the key indicator, at least for myself, for this law, because if you look at the requirements today, we already have requirements to register lobbying activities. Institutions in the executive branch all have in their codes of ethics a requirement of openness about meetings with lobbyists for maybe 12 years already. I think it started with this concept on lobbying developed by CNAB, and then it was required. So if you open a code of conduct of ministry of any ministry, you would imagine that these activities are published on their website. But in reality, there are a few ministries that started it, but it is not really implemented. We developed a common code of ethics for public servants in 2018, where we repeated this requirement, but we didn't succeed to put in place the actual practice. So I think we should change that by taking a different approach, more probably vivid and strong approach towards enforcement. So who is in charge so that it actually works? And we need to give also some resources to this institution, or if it's all institutions, then to see how it is done internally, and communicate about these requirements, because the fact that we need to publish these activities now is known just to the activists involved in this field. I think my colleagues wouldn't even know that they need to register. They don't know what is lobbying. So we need to be realistic and strong about implementation, and then most probably it will work. So that's it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inese. I'm so happy that you ended your talk with keywords, I think, realistic and implementation. And I think this is key because at the end of the day, the takeaway cannot be that people will be prosecuted for mistakes made under the lobbying regulation in some harsh manner. I think the key goal usually with any legislation on lobbying, first of all, is to get lobbying activities out into the spotlight and understand how decision-making is made. For instance, that's why I'm so happy that in Lithuania now we have made a U-turn and actually, first of all, encourage people to register meetings, make amendments to any mistakes or irregularities that are there, with very little punishment involved in the beginning. And I think that's very important for the business community as well, to know that they will not be crucified just for a misstep, because transparency is a habit. And that's why I'm glad that we, I'm told, can be joined by 2 more parliamentarians, because the more people speak about it and share their views, the better. I understand that Ainars Latkovskis and Rihards Kols is with us. Vika, could you perhaps join in and say a few words as to what a good law on lobbying would be for you?
Hello, it's a pleasure. Yes, this is
Yes,
Vita Tata. That's a pleasure to be here with you and listen both to your experience and try to move forward the laws here in Latvia. If Mr. Latkovskis talked about how long of a history and a timeline he can put together, I can still put together a longer one from the early 90s on all of these same issues. But I think the approach that the working group has put forth for Latvia is it's a good one. It's important. I wrote in the chat that you can't demonize this activity, but it does need to be made visible to everyone. And my concerns are how to find the proper balance between what is reportable and gets into the system and what is not. I think it's important for the official to be clear on a guideline. I also think it's important to try and avoid what I would say could be a chilling effect. For example, if we would have the same kind of reporting requirement that Sergejus has, a reporting requirement on the part of the lobbyist, what happens if I, as a decision maker, turn to a group in society and want their opinion? Do they automatically get engaged in the bureaucratic apparatus of lobbying disclosure? And I think that's something, it's important that whatever administrative onus we put on the lobbyist, the NGO, that it is not so harsh as to become chilling for getting the opinions and getting a variety of opinions into the decision-making process. So I'd be interested in hearing comments on this if anyone has the answer, and maybe Sergejus can talk about, is there a chilling effect in Vilnius from these reporting requirements?
Well, thank you so much, Vita. You know, we had snow for a brief moment today, so I am in no position to speak about chilling effects. But I know that I'd be happy to share some thoughts with you on that. Yet I know we also have Iveta joining us in. So if you could also switch on your camera, Iveta, and share a couple of ideas with us as to what a good law lobbying for you, that'd be absolutely great. Can you hear me? Are you with us?
Yes. Hello.
Great.
So I am really grateful that there is such a kind of event. That means a lot because as a lot of speakers before mentioned, one thing is about regulation, another thing is about mindset. And the mindset also could be defined as a culture. And we, as a growing and moving forward country, we need to also implement the legislative side and also explain about the positive sides about lobbying, that it's not always a bad thing. So if there is a transparency and if there is also accessibility, so it don't go through your friends or friends of friends, but it's really open access to anyone from NGO, or there is a possibility to engage in discussions, then also the mindset changing and the culture of debates and also more factual stuff are going in this process. And so we are having better legislation in all spheres or all disciplines. So that, in my opinion, is really important. So we have both parts of it. One is that we have regulation, we have a different kind of instruments, we have a control as it is, and also we are working with society as a whole to understand what really lobby is and what is the difference maybe with corruption, and how do you realize what is and what is not, and having those facts, because sometimes there is a lot of information that there is, but there's no actual proof of it. So somebody saw something that looked suspicious. So we have to avoid this kind of moment to gain the trust of society. And if we have trust, then we will flourish and be a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iveta, for this very optimistic note. And perhaps now, while we are showing final touches to our discussions, I can once again encourage you to leave some questions in the chat box and make sure that you also leave a footprint on this discussion, because I'm sure that my colleagues will get back to you or will take your questions into account. As to your question, Vita, you know, I'm a fan of cross-declaration, and I think that it has helped us incentivize the conversation about what transparent lobbying is. it's important to make sure that we don't have harsh penalties for missteps, just as I said, and it's vital to have data, and that data, I think, has to be collected in a unified manner. The framework is key, but then soft measures are just as important. And what I mean by soft measures is precisely what our parliament in Lithuania is doing now. It's simplifying the way members of parliament can fill out their agendas. It now is in conversation with LTI how to unify all committee data. And for instance, very soon we'll be publishing all unified committee data for the previous parliamentary session here in Lithuania. That data allows to speak in a much more sustainable manner about legislative footprint, about things that still need to be changed, but also demystifies a lot of issues. And I think that leaves us with a key question as to who is to benefit from better transparency in lobbying. You probably would first of all think, well, it's the public. And of course, the public will then have better access to politicians' behalf, understand how decisions are made, and decisions will be done in a more sustainable manner. But I also think it's politicians, because my apologies for this sound, but I'm almost done. Because politicians, I think, can get a lot of benefit and gain much more trust from better transparency in lobbying. And that is why I'm very glad that you have this discussion, and now can peacefully pass on the mic to Inese. Inese, the floor is yours, and I apologize for this now. So much for the interstate connection.
You have been broken, but when you gave the report, I think the experience of Lithuania is important, and I think especially your work of Transparency International through these years, when you had this very limiting law, limiting in the way that if you are in the register, you have to comply. So nobody complied with the register. So I am mentioning this as a good, bad example that we don't want to follow the way Lithuania adopted its law back in 2001. What that has allowed you to do is that you have, your politicians, your members of the parliament, 62% in the former Seimas, if I remember correctly, have been voluntarily publishing their agendas with whom they are meeting, which has been, of course, easier to do because your IT system of the parliament has made it easy for members to register and to declare it. But you have changed the culture without even changing the law. So showing us a very important part of what is needed is for public to generally understand both what the parliamentarians are doing, but also how the laws are made, and that you need to talk to those who it affects, including the businesses. How else would you be able to legislate, which is in some ways, in some minds, a turn of understanding how things work? I think many our voters think that we should just know, right? You sit there and you should just know, which is a fallacy, because we can only know if we talk to people whom it affects, and we need to be transparent about it. But so that is second thing. And third thing about Lithuanian experience is I like and have been using your slogan that a good MP is transparent and active MP. And that the reason why some MPs would not want their calendars to be public is that they are just not doing anything, and they would not have anything to report about. And I think that is also a very important part. The way we are discussing this at the moment in our draft. In our working group is we are focusing on the opening of calendars of public officials, which at the moment in our thinking excludes the member of the parliament, because we looked around and we discovered that this is not compulsory anywhere else in the world, I would be all for it. But some of our members said that we should not be the champions and we should wait and we should do this. And I don't want to stop the law just because we would not have, that the members of the parliament would not want to vote for it because there would be this thing they would not want to do, which is their own calendars. If we can do everything else, it is still much better than not to have the law. So that is also how we will approach also other issues. So to go towards what Richard said, a lean and enforceable solution, and to question these issues, what Vita mentioned as questions, so that we don't overregulate and we don't exclude. And through such examples, in a way, so there will be many reasons why we avoid, leave something out of the law that we will adopt. And but we will also know that there is something we don't need, there is something we don't need now, or we can't do now, and there is something that might be needed, but there is no political consensus. So there might be different reasons why something will be let out, but I will definitely fight for measures that are very important or crucial, to the law. So if you don't have them, then you lose the point of the law.
Thank you so much, Inese, for these views. I think, I hope this discussion has contributed to setting the stage for further conversations on the matter, and I feel very comfortable passing on the torch to my fellow TI colleague, the other Inese. Inese, please, the floor is yours.
This discussion, of course, I fully understand that we will need like at least 1 more hour to finish answering all the questions. But here we are, and our time is over. Paldies visiem mūsu šīs diskusijas dalībniekiem.
Thank you very much to all the participants of the discussion, also to the experts, and also to our supporters who said the opening speeches, and also to those who participated in the discussions. To those who are participating through Zoom platform, I am asking kindly to fill in this form, and the link is in chat. And as we see and understand, we had a very intense afternoon, and we got to know very detailed information from CNAB, how they were working previously, and also not to step on the rakes further. And also we heard that this representation of interests is part of the larger architecture. And in Latvia, we are coming closer to the last cornerstones. And that was reminded to us from Rajivod Grujic. And also Peter Ainsworth spoke to us that this regulation should be, otherwise it's going to be happening anyways, and happening in the US context in those pubs, and in Latvian context in saunas. So then we will have equal possibilities for everyone to influence decisions. And in this discussion, we would be happy also to spend another hour with parliament members and experts. And we heard that it is very important that this regulation is important. We heard from our MPs, and since the very beginning, we have been reminding in this discussion that ensuring of this transparent and equal discussion is very essential. And just as a short summary, I would like to say that this summary will be published on the ELMA homepage. Also, the video materials will be available. We are asking to follow our information, and we will also meet in next events, and we will continue this also on the 14th of May, and we will ask you to participate in public discussion about the conflict of interest. It's going to be done with the support of the US. So let us have also a successful rest of the day. And we have got some new ideas, so I hope that we can work and implement them later, and let's have a successful day. Goodbye.